The rain drummed against the windows of Lou's diner like nervous fingers tapping on glass. Maddie wiped down the same table for the third time, her dark eyes scanning the restaurant's dimly lit corners. Tuesday nights were usually quiet, but tonight felt different, as if the air itself held its breath. She'd been working at Lou's for 8 months, long enough to recognize the regulars, the tourists, and the ones who didn't belong. Tonight, 3 men sat in booth 7, the corner booth that most customers avoided because it was too dark, too isolated. But these men had specifically requested it. Maddie had served them once already. They'd barely touched their burgers, spending more time whispering than eating. The youngest one kept checking his watch, while the older man with the scar running from his left ear to his jaw hadn't stopped staring at the entrance. The third man, heavy-set with gold rings on every finger, drummed his fingers on the table in a rhythm that made Maddie's skin crawl. She tried to focus on her work, but something about them kept drawing her attention, like a splinter under the skin that wouldn't come out. "Table 4 needs more coffee," called Joe, the head waiter, snapping Maddie back to reality. She grabbed a fresh pot and made her way across the restaurant, but her path took her close to booth 7. "The moment he sits down, we move," the words hit her like ice water as she passed. If you're enjoying this thrilling tale, please consider subscribing to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life every week. Maddie's hand trembled slightly as she poured coffee for the elderly couple at table 4, her mind racing with what she'd just overheard. Who were they talking about? Her question was answered 30 seconds later when the diner's front door swung open with a gust of cold air. Nate Jackson walked in like he owned the entire block, which Maddie realized with a chill. He probably did. She'd heard whispers about him. The neighborhood's unofficial king. The man who solved problems that the police couldn't or wouldn't touch. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 29, with intensity threading through his posture and eyes that seemed to catalog everything and everyone in a single glance. 2 men followed him in, their expensive coats doing little to hide the fact that they were armed. They moved with the fluid precision of predators, scanning the room before taking positions near the bar and by the kitchen door. Nate smiled and nodded to familiar faces as he walked toward his usual table. Table 2, center of the room, where he could see everyone, and everyone could see him. "Evening, Nate." Lou appeared instantly at his side, wiping his hands on his apron. "Your usual booth is ready." Maddie glanced back at booth 7. The 3 men had gone rigid, their casual postures replaced by coiled tension, the scarred man's hand disappearing beneath his jacket. The young man at booth 7 checked his watch again, more frantically this time. The heavy-set man's eyes darted between Nate and his companions, while the scarred one kept his hand hidden beneath his jacket. Maddie didn't need to be a genius to connect the dots. They were waiting for something. Nate settled into his chair with the satisfaction of a man comfortable in his kingdom. One of his men approached and whispered something in his ear. Nate nodded and gestured to Lou for coffee, completely unaware of the predatory gazes fixed on his back. Time slowed to a crawl as Maddie watched the scarred man shift his weight forward, ready to stand. The other 2 tensed like springs about to release. Whatever they were planning was about to happen, and nobody else in the diner had noticed. Every instinct screamed at Maddie to stay out of it, to keep her head down and pretend she'd heard nothing. But something about Nate's genuine smile to Lou, the way he'd once left a $100 tip when her hands were shaking from exhaustion, she couldn't just watch. Before she could second-guess herself, Maddie moved. She glided toward Nate's table with the smooth efficiency of an experienced waitress, coffee pot in hand, and a bright smile fixed on her face. To everyone watching, she was simply doing her job. "More coffee, Mr. Jackson?" she asked softly as she approached. He looked up at her, and for a moment, she felt the full weight of his attention, his eyes darker than she'd expected, intelligent and measuring. "Of course, sweetheart," he said, lifting his cup expectantly. Out of the corner of her eye, Maddie saw the scarred man begin to rise, his hand emerging from his jacket with something metallic. It was now or never. Maddie leaned forward to pour the coffee, bringing her face close to Nate's ear. To anyone watching, it looked like exceptional customer service. "Don't move," she whispered, her voice so soft it was barely breath against his ear. Nate's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. She felt him go absolutely still, every muscle in his body suddenly alert. His eyes snapped to hers, searching her face with laser intensity, finding only urgent warning. 3 men, booth 7, she continued in that same whisper, pouring his coffee with practiced ease, armed, waiting for something. Nate's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his expression remained pleasant, as if she'd just told him about the daily special. "Clumsy me," he said loudly, as he deliberately knocked over the coffee cup. Hot liquid spilled across the table and onto his lap, creating an instant commotion. His bodyguards moved toward him as Lou rushed over with towels, the perfect cover for Nate to lean in close to his security. The scarred man at booth 7 froze in confusion, his plan disrupted by the unexpected chaos. His companions looked at each other uncertainly, their careful timing thrown into disarray by a spilled cup of coffee and a waitress who'd seen too much. The next 30 seconds unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Nate's security team moved into formation around him, appearing casual to anyone watching, but creating an impenetrable barrier between their boss and the men in booth 7. Lou continued fussing over the spilled coffee, completely unaware of the deadly game playing out in his diner. Maddie retreated behind the counter, pulse racing as she watched the 3 men engage in a heated, whispered argument. The scarred man's face had darkened with rage, while the younger one kept gesturing frantically toward the exit. They were deciding whether to abort their mission or proceed despite the disruption. Their decision came as the diner's front windows exploded inward in a shower of glass. 2 black SUVs had pulled up outside, disgorging men in dark suits who moved with military precision. Customers screamed and dove for cover as Nate's security team drew their weapons. "Kitchen." Nate grabbed Maddie's arm as he passed the counter, pulling her through the swinging doors and away from the chaos erupting in the dining area. His grip was firm but not painful, his movements decisive as gunfire erupted behind them. The kitchen staff had already fled through the back door, leaving pots boiling and ovens still on. Nate moved with purpose, leading Maddie past industrial refrigerators toward an exit she hadn't even realized existed. "Your car?" he demanded, voice terse as he pushed the door open a crack, scanning the alley beyond. "I take the bus," she managed, her voice steadier than she expected given the circumstances. Nate nodded once, pressing something into her palm, a key fob with an unfamiliar logo. "Blue sedan, 3 cars down. Get in and wait." Before she could protest, he was moving again, speaking rapidly into a phone that had materialized in his hand. "Back entrance compromised. Extraction route Bravo. And find out who leaked my schedule." He ended the call and turned back to Maddie, his eyes harder than before. "Why help me?" he asked, the question sharp as a blade. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer with each passing second. They had minutes, maybe seconds, before the alley would be flooded with police, or worse. "I don't know," Maddie answered honestly. "I just couldn't watch it happen." Something flickered in Nate's expression. Surprise, maybe even respect. He checked his watch, then the alley again. "They'll be looking for you now," he said, stating the cold fact without emotion. Witnesses don't last long in their world. The implication was clear. She'd saved his life, but in doing so had painted a target on her own back. The blue sedan beeped softly as they approached, its headlights flashing once in recognition. Nate opened the passenger door for her, then slid into the driver's seat. As they pulled away from Lou's diner, Maddie caught a final glimpse of the place that had been her workplace that morning, and would be a crime scene by midnight. "I should take you to the police," Nate said, but his hands never moved toward the direction of the precinct. Instead, he navigated through back streets and service roads, putting distance between them and the diner. They both knew going to the authorities wasn't an option anymore. 20 minutes and a dozen turns later, they arrived at a nondescript apartment building in a quiet neighborhood Maddie didn't recognize. The parking garage required a key card, which Nate produced from his wallet. They descended 2 levels before parking between a van and a luxury SUV. "This way," he instructed, leading her to a service elevator that required another key card. The doors opened to reveal a simple metal box with no floor indicators, just an unmarked panel where Nate pressed his thumb. The biometric scanner glowed green, and the elevator began to rise. When the doors opened again, Maddie stepped into what looked like an ordinary apartment foyer, but something felt off. The furnishings were tasteful but generic, like a high-end hotel suite rather than someone's home. No photos, no mail, no signs of everyday life. "Safe house," Nate explained, reading her expression. He moved through the space with familiarity, checking windows and activating a security panel beside the door. Red lights turned green, and a mechanical sound indicated multiple locks engaging. Maddie stood frozen in the center of the living room, reality finally crashing down around her. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been making rent on her studio apartment. Now she was in hiding with a man she barely knew, running from killers. Nate disappeared down a hallway, returning moments later with a burner phone and a glass of water. "Drink," he commanded, softer than before. Shock setting in. She hadn't realized how badly she was trembling until the water sloshed over the rim as she took it. "My sister," Maddie said suddenly, nearly dropping the glass. "I need to warn her. If they know about me, they might." Nate held up a hand, already dialing on his phone. He spoke briefly to someone named Marcus, giving her sister's name and address. "My people will watch her, make sure she's safe," he assured Maddie, "but no contact. Not yet. They'll be monitoring calls, social media, everything." He crossed to a window, peering through a gap in the blinds at the darkened street below. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. Maddie studied Nate's profile. The strong jaw, the tension in his shoulders, the calculating look that never quite left his eyes. "Why would they want you dead?" she finally asked. "It's complicated," he replied, the standard non-answer. Then, perhaps seeing the frustration on her face, he added, "Family business. Not everyone appreciates how I've been running things since my father stepped down." The admission seemed to cost him something, a crack in the armor he wore so effortlessly. "You should sleep," Nate said, gesturing toward a hallway. "Bedroom's second door on the right. Clean clothes in the closet. Probably won't fit perfectly, but they're better than—" He gestured at her coffee-stained uniform. "We'll figure out next steps in the morning." The bedroom was like the rest of the apartment. Expensive but impersonal. Maddie sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching her purse, her entire life now reduced to whatever she happened to have with her when she left for work that morning. Through the wall, she could hear Nate making calls, his voice a low, determined murmur in the darkness. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and the sound of voices. Maddie emerged from the bedroom in borrowed clothes, jeans that were slightly too long, and a sweater that hung loose on her frame. She found Nate in the kitchen with an older man, whose weathered face spoke of decades of hard living. "Raymond," the older man introduced himself without offering a hand or a smile. His eyes moved over Maddie with clinical detachment, assessing rather than leering. "You've created quite a situation for us, young lady." "She saved my life," Nate countered, placing a mug of coffee on the counter for Maddie. The simple gesture felt strangely intimate in the tense atmosphere. "Show some gratitude, old man." Raymond spread several photographs across the kitchen island, surveillance images of the 3 men from Booth 7. "Recognized all of them," he said grimly. "They work for the Constantines. This wasn't just a hit, it was a declaration of war." The name meant nothing to Maddie, but Nate's expression darkened. "Mikhail's getting desperate," he muttered. "His territory's shrinking. His suppliers are jumping ship and now he's making reckless moves." "There's more," Raymond continued, sliding a folder toward Nate. "The youngest one, Kevin Lawson. He's been seen with your cousin Ryan 3 times in the past month." The implication hung in the air like smoke, betrayal from within Nate's own family. Nate's fingers tightened around his coffee mug, the only sign that the news affected him. "Get Ryan under surveillance. Discreet, but thorough." Raymond nodded once and stepped away to make a call, leaving Nate and Maddie alone in the kitchen. "The Constantines," Maddie said quietly, testing the unfamiliar name. "They're your competition?" The question was naive, but she needed to understand the forces that had suddenly engulfed her life. "Family rivals," Nate corrected, his voice flat. 3 generations of bad blood. My grandfather and Mikhail's father were partners once, until a disagreement over territory turned deadly. We've maintained an uneasy peace for years, until now." Outside, rain began to fall again, droplets racing down the windows like tears. Maddie watched them, trying to process everything she'd learned. "What happens to me now?" she finally asked, the question she'd been avoiding since they arrived at the safe house. Nate studied her for a long moment before answering. "You're marked. The Constantines know you interfered. They'll assume you're under my protection, which means they'll try to use you to get to me." His honesty was brutal, but necessary. "I can disappear," Maddie offered. "I have a cousin in Arizona. I could—" Nate was already shaking his head before she finished the sentence. His expression was almost pitying, as if she'd suggested flying to the moon on paper wings. "They have resources," he explained gently. "Contacts in police departments, airports, bus stations. They monitor social media, banking transactions. You'd be tracked down within days, and I wouldn't be there to protect you when they found you." Raymond returned with a tablet displaying security camera footage from Lou's diner. The images showed the aftermath: police tape, shattered glass, and body bags being wheeled out. 3 casualties, he reported. 2 of Mikhail's men and 1 civilian caught in the crossfire. Maddie turned away, stomach churning. A person had died simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, just as she might have been if Nate hadn't pulled her out. The weight of her involvement settled on her shoulders like a physical burden. Mikhail will be expecting retaliation, Nate said, his tactical mind already several steps ahead. He'll fortify his properties, move his family to safety, probably reach out to his allies for support. His fingers drummed against the counter, a habit revealing his concentration. So we give him what he expects, Raymond suggested, his weathered face brightening with grim inspiration. Make him think we're planning a frontal assault while we actually... He trailed off, waiting for Nate to finish the thought. Nate's expression changed subtly, a predatory focus entering his eyes. While we actually use the one advantage he doesn't know we have. His gaze shifted to Maddie, and a chill ran down her spine as she realized what he meant. She was the unexpected variable in this deadly equation. The plan took shape over the next hour, a sophisticated deception that would use Mikhail's own expectations against him. Raymond made calls, organizing surveillance and gathering intelligence on the Constantine family's movements. Maps and photographs covered the dining table, marking territories and safe houses. We need to confirm Ryan's involvement, Nate insisted, circling back to the painful possibility of his cousin's betrayal. If he's compromised, we need to know exactly how much information he's leaked. The family angle clearly bothered him more than the attempt on his life. Maddie listened silently, absorbing everything. She'd been thrown into this world without preparation, but her mind adapted quickly, noting patterns and connections in the information flowing around her. What about the scarred man? She asked suddenly. He seemed to be in charge at the diner. Both men turned to her with surprise, as if they'd forgotten she could contribute more than just her presence. Anton Levin, Raymond supplied. Mikhail's enforcer, former Spetsnaz with a reputation for creative problem-solving. The euphemism didn't disguise the brutality implied. He likes to work with a specific team, Nate added, appreciating Maddie's engagement. The younger one is new, but the heavy-set man has been with him for years. They're loyal to Anton first, Mikhail second. This information shifted something in the strategy, a new angle forming. Maddie took a deep breath, making a decision she knew would irrevocably change her life. I want to help, she said firmly, not just hide and wait. If I'm already in danger, I might as well make myself useful. Nate and Raymond exchanged a look that contained volumes of unspoken communication. There is a way, Nate said slowly, measuring each word. But it's dangerous, and once we start, there's no going back. He laid out the core of the plan, using Maddie as visible bait, while simultaneously exploiting Ryan's betrayal to feed false information back to the Constantines, a double deception that might just work. 3 days later, Maddie sat at the bar of the Astor Hotel's renowned restaurant, wearing an emerald dress that complemented her coloring perfectly. Small cameras disguised as jewelry recorded everything around her. The transformation from waitress to elegant decoy had been swift and thorough. Remember, just be visible, Nate's voice came through the nearly invisible earpiece. He was watching from a private dining room overlooking the main floor, surrounded by security personnel and surveillance equipment. We want Anton to see you, recognize you, and report back to Mikhail. The restaurant buzzed with the energy of Manhattan's elite, politicians mingling with celebrities, business tycoons closing deals over expensive wines. Maddie sipped her sparkling water, maintaining the perfect picture of a woman waiting for someone important. Her pulse quickened when she spotted Ryan entering the restaurant, exactly as planned. Nate's cousin moved with practiced confidence, greeting the maitre d' like an old friend. According to their intelligence, he would be meeting Anton here tonight, unaware that his treachery had been discovered. Ryan just arrived, she murmured, pretending to check her phone. No sign of Anton yet. Nate acknowledged with a soft click in her ear. The trap was set. Ryan had been fed information about Nate's supposed whereabouts tonight, information he would eagerly pass to Anton. Maddie felt rather than saw Anton's arrival 20 minutes later. A shift in the room's energy, a sudden tension that prickled along her spine. She didn't turn, maintaining her casual pose at the bar, but in her peripheral vision, she caught the distinctive scar as he approached Ryan's table. He's here, she whispered, meeting with Ryan now. In her ear, Nate issued rapid commands to his team. The confrontation was imminent, but not here. They wanted to follow Anton back to Mikhail, to end this with one decisive strike rather than a protracted war. The meeting between Anton and Ryan lasted precisely 12 minutes. They spoke in low tones, exchanged no documents, and parted with nothing more than a nod. To casual observers, it looked like any business meeting in New York City. Maddie knew better. She'd just witnessed the betrayal of family loyalty in real time. As Anton passed near the bar on his way out, his gaze swept over Maddie, then snapped back with sharp recognition. For 3 heartbeats, their eyes locked in silent acknowledgement. She saw the moment he realized who she was, saw his hand twitch toward what was surely a concealed weapon. Through her earpiece, Maddie heard the coordinated movements of Nate's team establishing a perimeter around the hotel. The operation expanded beyond what she'd initially understood, with tactical units positioned on adjacent rooftops and plainclothes operatives blending with pedestrians on the street below. Behind Anton, Ryan remained at his table, oblivious to the fact that his betrayal had been documented from multiple angles. The cousin's expression shifted between smug satisfaction and nervous vigilance, revealing the internal conflict of a man who had chosen money over blood, never suspecting that his duplicity was already exposed. Maddie felt a strange calm settle over her as the pieces moved into position. This world of shadows and calculated risks wasn't so different from navigating the chaotic dinner rush at Lou's. Both required anticipating movements, reading intentions, and maintaining composure when everything threatened to collapse into chaos. Maddie didn't flinch. She held his gaze with a confidence she didn't entirely feel, then deliberately raised her glass in a mocking toast. The message was clear. She wasn't hiding, and she wasn't afraid. The audacity of the gesture clearly startled Anton, buying precious seconds as he reassessed the situation. By the time Anton recovered and moved toward her, Nate's security team had materialized around the bar, not obviously threatening, but present enough to make Anton reconsider a direct confrontation in such a public setting. He retreated, but the fury in his eyes promised this wasn't over. "He's leaving," Maddie reported quietly, heading toward the east exit. Outside, unmarked vehicles were ready to follow Anton to what they hoped would be Mikhail's location. The real confrontation would happen away from innocent bystanders, on territory of Nate's choosing. Dawn broke over the city as Maddie stood on the balcony of Nate's penthouse, watching the first golden rays illuminate the skyline. Below her, New York was waking up, unaware of the power shifts that had occurred overnight. The Constantine threat had been neutralized, not through bloodshed as she'd feared, but through a combination of leverage, negotiation, and the threat of mutually assured destruction. "You should be resting," Nate said, joining her with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. The past 48 hours had left shadows under his eyes, but there was a lightness to him now. The weight of constant vigilance temporarily lifted. He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing in a moment of unexpected warmth. "It's strange," Maddie reflected. "A week ago, I was worried about making rent. Now I'm standing in a penthouse after helping take down a crime family." The absurdity of her situation struck her anew with each passing day, like waking repeatedly into the same strange dream. Nate smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face from handsome to breathtaking. "You have good instincts, Maddie. You see things others miss, you adapt quickly, and you don't panic under pressure. Those are rare qualities." The penthouse phone rang, and Nate answered it with a terseness that suggested the call was expected, but unwelcome. Maddie watched his expression harden as he received what appeared to be news about Ryan's extraction. His cousin would face family justice, rather than legal consequences. A mercy of sorts that spoke volumes about Nate's complex moral code. Beyond the gleaming city skyline, Maddie knew her sister was being quietly relocated to a luxury apartment with enhanced security, another life irrevocably altered by her split-second decision at Lou's diner. The guilt mingled with relief, knowing her family would be protected, even as their freedom became circumscribed by invisible boundaries. Later that morning, Raymond arrived with documents, new identity options, financial accounts, security protocols, spreading them across Nate's dining table like artifacts from a civilization Maddie was only beginning to understand. The old man's grudging respect showed in the thoroughness of his preparations, each contingency addressed with the precision of someone who had orchestrated many such transitions. The unspoken question hung between them. What happened now? With Mikhail neutralized and a truce negotiated between the families, Maddie was technically free to return to her old life, but they both knew that was impossible. She'd seen too much, knew too much, had become part of a world that didn't allow casual exits. "Raymond thinks you should work for us officially," Nate said, breaking the silence. "Intelligence gathering, strategic assessment. You have a talent for reading people and situations." The offer was presented casually, but they both recognized its significance. A legitimate place in his organization, protection, security. Maddie considered the proposal, weighing it against her former dreams of finishing college and opening her own restaurant someday. Those ambitions suddenly seemed distant and small, compared to the intensity of the past week, the rush of being part of something larger than herself. "And what do you think?" she asked, meeting his gaze directly. The question contained multitudes. Was this just business for him? Was she merely an asset to be utilized? Or was there something more behind his protective instincts, the way his eyes lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking? Nate set down his coffee mug, his expression serious. "I think you saved my life when you had every reason to look the other way. I think you're extraordinary, Maddie, and I think having you walk away would be..." He paused, searching for the right word. "A mistake I'm not willing to make." The confession cost him something. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the vulnerability that briefly replaced his customary control. Nate Jackson didn't admit weakness, didn't express need, yet here he was, essentially asking her to stay. "I'll need my own apartment," Maddie said, decision made, "and I want to finish my degree." Nate's smile returned, relief evident in the relaxation of his features. They would negotiate the details later, boundaries, expectations, the precise nature of what was growing between them. For now, it was enough to stand together as the city awakened, two people whose lives had collided through chance and choice, bound together by a whispered warning and the promise of something neither had expected to find. Thank you for following my story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is crucial for me to continue creating content for you.